So to start off, just a quick intro on what is a Power BI workspace. So a Power BI workspace contains Power BI content. So can be your data sets, your dashboards, your data flows, your Excel workbooks. Essentially, it is your collaborative space for development and sharing. So the image that you see on this slide is a Power BI workspace, and it has a name, financial reporting. And within this workspace, you can see we have a few different artifacts. We have a balance sheet report, an executive dashboard, a finance data set, and then there's also a financial reporting report. So again, a workspace is just a collection of Power BI artifacts in which you can begin to collaborate with your colleagues. Now, if you are a Power BI report designer, if you're actually, curating content, creating reports, potentially creating data sets, typically the best practice is to not share that content with end users within the context of a workspace, but rather publish it to what is referred to as a Power BI app. And a Power BI app is a content type that simply wraps up all of the Power BI content into an easy-to-use content type called this app, in which you can customize the navigation, and all the people that are going to consume this content need to do is navigate to the app. They don't need to worry about, navigating the Power BI service. Sometimes I know I had a little bit of a learning curve when I first started using the service. You have to, know the navigation on the left-hand side to go to the workspace. Then you have to go to the content of the workspace and then find your content. The app, makes it simple. So if you have, your finalized reports and you want to share that with, the management, the best way to do that is within a Power BI app. So understanding of this kind of process of workspace and then publishing to an app is kind of crucial to this workspace architecture that I'm going to propose. Now, another kind of precursor to all of these conversations is making the distinction between the classic and the quote-unquote new workspace. So the classic workspace is actually being deprecated by Microsoft. If you've ever done any reporting on your workspaces, they're referred to as group workspaces. And the reason why, and when I say group workspace, if you were to access, if you're leveraging the Power BI REST API, the results that you actually get back, it labels these workspaces as groups. And the reason these workspaces are backed by a Microsoft 365 group. When you create a classic workspace, you're actually creating a Microsoft 365 group behind the scenes. These classic workspaces only have members and admins, so two roles. I mentioned Microsoft is in the process of deprecating these moving forward. They've already put in some plans you'll see throughout the service where you can block creation of classic workspaces in favor of the new default workspace type. So this is the preferred workspace type moving forward. One of the things it does not create the Microsoft 365 group on creation in favor of more granular roles, in which Jared will talk about in depth. These roles include admin, member, contributor, and viewer. So you can assign Azure Active Directory group to these roles, but in order to kind of succeed in these best practices of workspace management, you definitely need this default or new version 2 workspace to enable these different roles. And we'll talk about what each of them can do a little bit. Some other features you get with the default workspace experience is you get a contact list, so you can actually define who to contact for workspace related needs. So the use of shared data sets. In order to leverage this feature, which is going to be crucial to kind of this proposed architecture, you need to be using a default workspace experience. So, in summary, I have taken my own stance on classic versus default workspaces. Moving forward, I would encourage organizations to turn off or block the creation of classic workspaces, as they don't have the features to uphold kind of best practices that are being quickly established throughout the Power BI space, and ultimately they will be deprecated at some point in time. So wanted to throw this little tidbit out there. Now, when you're creating a workspace, it's very important to understand the type of content that is going to be present within that workspace. So I've gone ahead and, with the help of my team, developed these workspace types. And you could probably find some similarities to what we've defined here online, but I want to say that these are types that my team has come up with. So I like separating workspaces into 3 separate types. The first being a provision subject area. So most oftentimes you have a project or a certain reporting need, and the IT team is going to come together. They're going to create a dev, test, and production version of these workspaces, and they're going to create a workspace per one report category and curate content for end users. So, these are the IT folks. They're going to get a request for a project. They're going to create reports. They're going to have all the nice features that Power BI offers because they know the product in and out. And they're ultimately going to create an app at the end of it all. So they're going to develop within the context of this workspace, within a project, and eventually they're going to work it through a dev, test, and production workspace. And they're ultimately going to publish it to an app. And I have some visuals to hopefully clear up some of the questions you have on this kind of design. Another workspace type is a self-service workspace. So the self-service workspace is going to be an area where you have one per department, whether it be finance, supply chain, human resources. It's essentially an area where they can go, and it's a collaborative environment for them to create their own reports. So ideally, they're going to leverage a data set that's already there for them, and they could create ad hoc reports and create reports as needed. So they differ, as in, one is kind of these corporate reports in which have, requirements and kind of go through a process of development. And then you have self-service in which, it's really a playground for exploration. And then finally, one of the main topics of today is a shared data set workspace. And ultimately, this is going to be a workspace that only holds or contains data sets or data flows. And essentially what this allows you to do is you can have data modelers focus on the data sets and think of it as like a deli menu where you can actually pick and choose the data sets you want and begin sharing them across workspaces. So, it's like a shopping cart, or I'm trying to think of the best metaphor here, but ultimately all these the self-service workspaces or even the provision subject area workspaces can kind of pick and choose data sets, certified data sets potentially, to report off of. So let's take a look at what this may look like. So here are those provision subject area workspaces. So let's say, the finance team came to us and they said, hey, I need some financial reporting. What we would do is we would provision 3 workspaces for them, a development, a test, and a production. And ultimately, you can move your content from development to test with proper connection strings. And finally, that final workspace in which when it's all tested and vetted out in kind of this pre-prod workspace environment, you can then deploy to an app and have all of your end users kind of leverage that app. But what this does is it allows you to kind of, again, craft that content for them, make sure your connection strings are appropriate across the workspaces, and it also gives you that ability to kind of test changes as you move things forward through environments. So again, if another project comes along, in this case we have supply chain, you're going to spin up another 3 workspaces. So you may be thinking that this is a lot of overhead, but there's features that are already available with premium, such as deployment pipelines, that are going to make the automation of this a little bit easier. So if you're interested in kind of that development, test, and production lifecycle, deployment pipelines are probably of great interest for you, but this design can be used without the deployment pipelines as well. It's just there's a little bit more overhead, but this is kind of a recommended good practice, I'll say, for your Power BI content. So again, these workspaces are going to be managed by typically IT. So what happens for the workspaces in which your management or CEO needs to create their own ad hoc reports? You need to begin considering shared data set workspaces. So this is, again, IT is going to manage a certified data set workspace where you create content, that single version of the truth potentially, in which you publish data sets to this workspace. It's going to have similar dev, test, and production workspaces, and eventually this is going to be your shopping cart for data sets to kind of share with other workspaces. So now, Again, your shared data sets, so this is kind of what it would look like. Your shared data sets will kind of drive some of these other workspaces potentially. But also, here's where those self-service workspaces come from. Your end users that are creating ad hoc reports, they don't want to sometimes have anything to do with the data modeling. So rather than have them be concerned with that, IT can simply serve them up a data set, leveraging the shared data set workspace. They can reference it in their department-specific reporting workspace, and they can begin building their own reports and their dashboards. And if they are a little tech savvy, they can create their own data sets as well within the context of that workspace. So this is kind of going to be the shared data sets is going to be kind of the theme of the rest of the presentation here. So this idea, again, is just kind of abstracting your data sets in their own centralized location in which they could begin to be shared with other workspaces. So just some other questions, if this workspace management kind of resonates with you and you're looking to kind of establish this at your own organization, here are some questions that always pop up within the conversation of, who's going to be doing the work. So who will be creating the workspaces? If you're going to, follow this pattern, you have to have a process in which someone is going to be creating these workspaces. How will they be requested, whether it be a ServiceNow ticket, an IT help desk, things of that nature. And then what is the process? So if you're going to have your dev, test, and production, and you don't have premium, you need to come up with that process of how these are originally going to be provisioned. If you have premium capacity, you need to kind of give some attention to what workspaces are going to get premium and which ones are not. You're paying for hardware here, so you want to be kind of careful and meticulous on what content really and truly needs premium features. Another question that comes up is, should My Workspace be used? If you have a Power BI Pro account, you've seen My Workspace. There's a lot of depending on your organization, there's a lot of things that could go wrong with My Workspace. If people start pushing content there and they begin sharing it, then they leave the company. I've had organizations come and say, we don't want My Workspace being used. You can't turn it off, but you can, set policies to say, if you need content, request it through our ServiceNow process, and we'll create a self-service reporting area for you. So just something to keep in mind. And then, of course, who administers and monitors the workspace. So just a few questions that personally I've had to answer in kind of striving for this workspace management architecture I kind of proposed.